Welcome to my live chat. I am so excited to be talking about a really compelling issue, and that is the shame that we often feel when it comes to how we eat, how we feel about our bodies, even how we work out and in our fitness regimes. So I am really thrilled to have my guest with me today, JC Lippold. He is an expert in this area. He is a leadership and change consultant, and he works with companies, nonprofits, community organizations, really shining the light on this issue. And I was really fortunate enough to have to actually see him speak at a nutrition conference that I went to recently. And it was just really life-changing for me. I've been writing about it a lot this month and talking a lot about really moving past this shame that we have when it comes to our food, fitness, and bodies. So welcome, JC. Thanks so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I'm excited to chat about all the things at all times with you. So thanks for the space.
Yes, absolutely. So before we get started, I have so many questions for you. Can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always kind of start anytime I talk about what I do and who I am by saying that I look at myself as a homemaker, right? Someone who in a lot of different realms attempts to make space for people where they feel what we should feel in a home space. We feel stillness. We feel the opportunity to be courageously ourselves. Because once we find that space, we know that we do potent things. We do unique things that make sense to our intuition, our history, and our desires for what we want to see in the world. So I have a background in theater and education, in fitness, in mindset type of work, all of these things that allow people to truly tap into what makes them them.
Yeah, I love that. I just love what you're doing with your work. So thanks so much. And I want to plunge right in and talk about this shame that we feel. And, you know, I think it's been illuminated a lot recently. I'm seeing more and more people talking about it on social media, and I feel like we're really bringing this out of the darkness into the light. So I was wondering if you could share your own thoughts about what are the experiences people are having when it comes to shame, and how does it impact our lives?
Yeah, and you already just touched on a lot of really wide basins of opportunities for conversation. So, like, if we think about shame, I always love going into a dictionary understanding, because it's that genesis of how we look at words. So 3 really hard, heavy definitions of shame: a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. Another one, a loss of respect or esteem, dishonor. Lastly, a regrettable or unfortunate situation or action. So we think about body shame, food shame, fitness shaming. All of these definitions lead us to this idea that if I'm the one feeling shame, I have done something drastically wrong within my own being that is foolish, that then leads to this idea that I am broken, that I am not enough, that I am in responsibility of being less than who I'm supposed to be. So, a really bad thing to feel. And if we think about how many people we know who experience this and where it comes from, like Sharon, you just raised, the power of social media within expounding shame, within rooting shame within a person. Yeah, what social media is a big conveyor of this prominence of and pervasiveness of shame in our culture. But I always love sharing this quote by Edith Wharton, where she talks about how light is shared in 2 ways: from the candle and from the mirror that reflects it. One of the hardest things about pinpointing the root of shame is that it's like that candle and that mirror. We are all mirrors to what we see and what we feel and what we think is right, as we all aspire to find information and pathways to our well-being, right? Body, food, and fitness shaming are all rooted within this desire or this belief that we are incredibly responsible for achieving healthiness or wellness. And if you're not looking at the screen right now, I'm dog earing all of those things. What is healthiness? What is wellness? What is the right way to eat or the right way to move? If there is this perceived correct way of doing these things, all of a sudden, we all fall short of accomplishing it. So we see ourselves experiencing shame. We see others through social media lenses. We hear about how other people see our shame, with whether it be medical professionals or RDNs or fitness professionals. We hear about it from our loved ones who, maybe rooted in kindness, they throw us shame in order to encourage us or remind us to be well or healthy. This idea of shame, aside from it feeling really bad, it also creates these pathways that perpetuate more and more shame, and also more and more barriers between us and our owning our lives, our wellness, our happiness, all of these things.
Yeah, that's very well said. And it is so true that, whether it's from your family, society, social media, all of these kinds of judgments are placed upon us, and people are already experiencing shame, and it's just getting piled on. And even in terms of, you talked about health and wellness shame, that's really even hard to pinpoint, because people get so many messages. What is the right diet, and what is the right exercise program? And people have limitations. They have different impacts in their life that can affect all that. So it's so confusing to people. And I learned at the nutrition conference that you spoke at that this is really happening at high levels among consumers, even dietitians and health professionals. They're experiencing shame when it comes to food, body, and fitness at high levels. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, Southpaw Insights is the organization that conducted this first comprehensive research in the nation on shame. Fueled by the desire of a lot of invested parties to go, how do we look at a consumer's pathway if we do not acknowledge the shame that they're carrying? Some rough stats. One in three people state that they have experienced shame personally. 88% of those people have long-term, lifelong residual symptoms and effects and changes within the way that they operate from that shame. Which means, if we think about that, we are all continuously surrounded by the effects of shame. Sharon, to your point, we look at people within the industry of dietitians, within the industry of caretakers of others in any health or wellness realm. How many of those people have a shame story that led them into doing the work that they do? I always talk about the root of my shame. And I'll share it right now, and then I'll kind of let this pebble hitting the water ripple out. I always talk about when I was young, very emotional, not athletic, non-competitive child. I have an alpha brother and an alpha father who love me, and I adore them. And we would be playing baseball in the backyard. And as a kid who loved the idea of baseball, but was incredibly fearful to go ahead and participate in a masculine, in a competitive realm, I did not like the feel of a baseball hitting the bat because it made my arms shake, and that made me get emotional. So my dad lovingly would throw me a rag ball, so I wouldn't have that negative response. He would throw the real baseball to my brother, the rag ball to me. I remember a day that I got the confidence. I went to the park. I'm like, I'm going to go play baseball with the other young male identifying human beings at the park. This sounded like a great idea to me. I go to the park, and all of a sudden there wasn't a rag ball option for me. And of course, I didn't want there to be one, because then I would stand out in the not enough way that the rag ball represented. So I went to the park, and then I went home, laden with shame, because I was not enough to fit into the constructs of what I was supposed to be, of what I was supposed to do. Now, as I mentioned, that's my story. If we drop that pebble into the water and we see the ripples, how many people have the shame story from an early age, whether it be in a physical sense, running the mile, track and field day, dodgeball, the hang test, the rope climb, the fill in the blank, or from a food standpoint, are you going to eat all of that? Oh, that's not healthy. Looking at your friends' lunch bags, or eating hot lunch, or bringing lunch from home. All of these things are rooted within two things: the assumptions of what is right and healthy and well within our culture lens, and then are we living up to it? If the answer is no, I'm not living up to it, that little root, that little seed plant of shame, for most of us is from a very young age. So how does that play into our future? Well, it creates a lot of assumptions of what is right and what is wrong. So a lot of the work that we've been doing is on going, how do we derail this idea that shame is this pervasive, sneaky essence and presence around us that we never actually pinpoint? Because once we pinpoint it, once we see it, once we rationalize it, and Sharon, the work that you do and so many RDNs do to go, hey, we have heard this. Let's look at this. Let's look at this critically and see what the pros and the cons, the benefits and the disadvantages to any pathway to how we treat ourselves. This is really that starting place to derail this cycle of shame that we see.
Yeah, I just love you sharing your story and throwing that pebble in the water, because we all have stories about shame. And, you mentioned that dietitians, healthcare professionals often approach their career because of some story like that. And I think most dietitians have some kind of a impetus that started them in that field of nutrition that has a personal influence. For me, I was always interested in being thinner and on every diet that I could think of when I was a teenager. And that led me to studying nutrition and realizing that there were healthy ways to live and eat. But, when we think about that societal pressure to look a certain way, one of the things I like to talk about is that you could give everybody the exact same diet. I could give a room full of people the exact same diet and exercise program for a month, and they would all react differently to that diet. So this idea that if we only follow this perfect diet, perfect exercise, we're going to look a certain way is just ridiculous, but that's the pressures that we have. And it really affects that shame as well when it comes to our food choices, our body types, this idea that if we just work harder, if we just do something a little more perfectly, then we will, alleviate that shame that we have with our food, our bodies, our fitness programs. So there's just so much. And then when it comes to even our diet choices, like you mentioned, what kids are bringing to lunch, what our families cooked at home, whether, where we're shopping, all of these things can really affect how we feel about our food choices. So one thing I wanted to talk a little bit more about is, on one hand, as a dietitian, this is really something that I struggle with. And I think a lot of people in my field struggle with. And that is, on one hand, we don't want people to experience shame when it comes to their food choices and their body. But on the other hand, we want to help people live a healthier life and have a healthier diet that reduces their risks of things like diabetes and heart disease. So do you have any ideas about how we can reconcile this when it comes to our food and fitness choices?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna raise up 2 points. One is kind of the wonderful way you just processed, the reality of our culture. And then number 2, I'm going to talk about a term that I've created that I use all the time called enoughness. So first of all, Sharon, you just spent a wonderful 90 seconds talking about the complexity of the human experience. We could give 100 people the exact same diet fitness routine, and the way it's going to hit them is going to be different every single time. It's complex. And then you spoke about the desire of people. And again, this goes for professionals, for loved ones, for our civic duty to care for our fellow human being. And because we care, we attempt to make things as simple as possible, because we assume if something is simple, then it's executable. And if it's executable, we're going to be leaving our mark on the world. That train of thought is great, but it's broken. And here's why. If the problem is complex, providing overly simplified messaging and pathways does not reconcile the complexity. A lot of the work that I've been engaged in is within this, I've already referenced the cycle of shame. The cycle of shame starts with people hearing really simple messages on what to do. I'll throw out some of them. You eat so little, no wonder you're so skinny. That's meant to be a compliment. Whoa, your plate could feed an army. That's meant to be playful. You look great for your age. Backhanded compliment. Commit to be fit. Don't be a brat, burn the fat. Get the body you deserve. Dare to be great. Be 1% better than you were yesterday. All of these things sound pseudo-motivational, pseudo-directional, and incredibly simple. Simple if you're willing to commit and grit and put yourself in the seat where you are most important. But here's the deal. We know this to be true. Think about every infomercial for every diet and fitness thing you've ever seen on TV for the past 50 years. The main part of the screen is the happiness, the clarity, the pop, and then at the bottom of the screen, what does it say? These results are not to be expected within the general public. Everything is complex and differentiated. Mm-hmm. So if we look at that, the simple message leads to people going, hey, it sounds simple, therefore my fitness and my nutrition and my well-being should also be simple. We try it, we do it, we fail, or we think we fail because we don't achieve what we think we're supposed to achieve. And then what does that do? It drives us into feeling inward, in isolation. Mm-hmm. Seems like everybody else has it figured out. I don't. Therefore, I must be the problem.
Yeah.
If I'm the problem, I feel guilty. Within that guilt is the birthplace of shame. That shame leads to isolation and desperation. And then you're left going, I'm ashamed of me. Everyone's ashamed of me. I need to fix this quick. So what do? We look for the simplified message again and again and again. So you already heard me reference this cycle of shame. And a lot of the work that I've been engaged in is literally laying out what is the birthplace, and then where do we return to it again without our acknowledgement that something is happening to us that we have some control over. So the birthplace of this cycle of shame starts within these simplified messages. We hear it again and again. You eat so little, no wonder you're so skinny, right? That's meant to be a compliment. Well, your plate could feed an army. That's meant to be playful. You look great for your age. Backhanded compliment. All of these lines lead us to feeling a certain way. And even sometimes they're prescriptive, like be 1% better each day. Nothing tastes good as skinny feels. Move more, eat less. That's the big one, right? What's the solution for all the problems in the world? Move more, eat less, and everybody will be healthy. But that's the birthplace of the cycle, because guess what? People listen to that, they try to accomplish it, they fail. And who do they blame? Themselves. In that blame, they move themselves into isolation. They think they are the problem. So they feel fearful to enter into conversation since they know they are what is wrong. That isolation leads to guilt. That guilt leads to shame. I am ashamed of myself, and the world is ashamed of me. From that shame, desperation, and then that cycle starts again. From desperation, I look for the easy answer. And we have all of these loving professionals who are attempting to simplify the complexity. And I think maybe our opportunity is to get really good at acknowledging their reality, acknowledge the complexity. And then what I see again and again and again from so many people is then walking alongside people as they find their pathway to what their healthiness looks like. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned, I have this term that I use that I think reconciles, Sharon, as you raised up, we don't want to enslave people to their shame, but we also want to help people move towards healthier lifestyles. So this term enoughness, I define it as the act of acknowledging that you are already indeed enough. Now, enoughness does not equate complacency. It does not mean I don't need to do anything because I am enough. What enoughness means is I am in my current state capable of doing things, thinking things, feeling things that are going to be innately good for me, that are going to help me grow, that are going to help me grow in understanding and in confidence of who I am and what I do. Within this idea of enoughness, there's 4 tenets, and I'll share 2 of them right now. The first one is all about our communication, all about our language. And it's wrapped up in this: minimize the minimizing language and speak your truth quickly. The words just and only, they sneak into our language to minimize the power of the work we're doing. Well, I'm just going to go for a walk. I don't have time for anything else. I'm just going to go for a walk. Well, I don't think I could do the whole plan that my dietitian is suggesting. So I'm just going to start by doing these 2 little simple things. Just going to do little simple things. We're setting ourselves up for failure. Number 1, just is minimizing the power of the work and then saying that it's little and simple things. But what if those little and simple things are actually really, really big, hard things for me? If the world sees them as little and simple, all of a sudden I'm set up for failure. The second is tied to the first. So this first idea of bringing attention and awareness to mindfully communicating our truth without minimizing language. Secondly, is this idea of our intuition. I define intuition as the part of our being that says, hey, do that, that will feel good, that will make sense. We all have that inside ourselves. Culturally, we are trained to not listen to it, right? How often do we hear within maybe a fitness world, your brain will say no before your body will give up. So just keep going. Actually, no, if your body is telling you something and you are being trained to not listen to it, we are in essence taking away our eyesight, our ability to hear and sense and taste and touch, because our intuition is there for a purpose. So if we tune into what our body is telling us, if we speak our language as clearly and as monetized as being good or bad or enough or not enough, all of a sudden we start empowering that person that we are attempting to help, whether it be our client or our mother or our brother or our neighbor, by acknowledging the person rather than maybe the shame that they are carrying.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'll go ahead and throw one more bit in. Someone asked the question, so within this idea of not wanting to amplify or add to or create shame for people, it sounds like it's a really hard conversation to navigate. What do we do? Are we just supposed to be quiet? Are we not supposed to say what we see or walk into that space assuming that we can be alongside them? And I thought when this question was raised for a moment, and what I saw the person and I saw the shame. I think a lot of times because we care about people, we want to acknowledge that we see the shame. We want to acknowledge the shame and speak to the shame because that's the thing we want to go away. But if we are that person who's carrying that shame, and that dietitian, that fitness professional, that loved one, whoever it is, starts the conversation by speaking to the shame, by pandering to the shame, by coddling the shame, rather than by speaking to the person who is actually really there, then that person goes, they see the shame too. They become a mirror to the shame rather than a mirror to the person. So often in these shame conversations, as we already said, it's complex. Shame will not go away in the short term. Shame may never go away. I always like to say this: shame begins to lose its power once we see it and we say that we see it. It begins to go away. It doesn't go away, but it begins to go away. I have lived with my shame for decades upon decades upon decades. I walk into a room and I go, ugh, and I close in on myself for a moment because that's automated. It's habitual. It's something that's in me. But because I have been able to see it in myself and see it in others and to engage in conversations like we're doing right now, it's amazing how much power that shame loses. Because I am enough, because you are enough, because I don't have to do anything, nor does anybody else ever have to do anything to be enough right now, to be happy, to be whole, to make decisions that are going to bring them joy, to begin to try new things that they may quote, quote, fail at or may not, quote, quote, work for them. But in reality, when we do things, even if they don't stick, we're saying to that self, rather than the shame, I am enough, I care about myself, I'm invested in my own journey. And we know how much easier it is to support someone when they feel empowered to be a part of their journey.
Absolutely. That's just amazing, JC, on so many different levels. And I love some of the examples you shared, and really this idea of enoughness, I think, has really resonated with me in my work and even in my own personal life. There's one thing I was thinking about is even diet culture is so shaming in so many ways because of this feeling of enoughness. There's so many fad diets, or even diets that are promoted as being healthful, that just overly focus so much on the actual, really almost being compulsive about food choices, where you're just in this diet culture world where you're constantly measuring yourself up to this ideal that can be so damaging and really disheartening, and then ends up encouraging people to fail, like it's all their fault, just like you were mentioning. So I think there's just so much we can learn from this concept of feeling enough and starting out that way, and looking at for example, you mentioned when we use the word just, I hear this, well, people will go, well, I haven't had time to go to the gym, I've just been going for walks. It's like, that's exercise. Yep. There was a big study that came out this week that showed, I think it was 70 minutes of moderate exercise a week reduced your risk of chronic disease significantly. So people, will have these ideas where they have to have these really lofty goals in order to succeed when they're already doing so much to live healthy lives. And I will see people in my work where they've literally read every, book on diet, and they're investing so much time, and they're always chasing the new diet, whatever that might be, always looking for this ideal diet. And it just spending so much time on this, So we really have a lot to work on when it comes to helping people move past this shame. And one thing I wanted to talk to you about was one of the things that really bothers me about food shame is that sometimes it's really putting people's food cultures and food traditions out the window. You could be eating this diet pattern that your grandparents ate, and all of a sudden that's not the cool food according to a particular diet book or online, whether it's let's just talk about beans and rice, for example. Yep. If a lot of diet gurus are saying you shouldn't be having any beans and no grains, but what if that's a food that's part of your traditional diet, and now you feel shame, and maybe you're excluding that from your diet, and that just really, just hurts my heart when I think about all these beautiful food ways that people are just forfeiting because they feel like they have to. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Our minds are powerful things. Two thoughts come to mind, and as a person who I'm not a dietitian. I'm not someone who will ever give nutrition advice, because I know that people are hungry for the answers from, again, that desperation leads us to look for simplified messaging. There's this wonderful study that was done on stress. They asked two questions. They asked, number one, is stress good or bad? The second question they asked is, do you live with a lot of stress or a little bit of stress? Then they watched these people's lives over the next decades and decades and decades. And what they found is The people who lived the longest were the people who thought that stress was a good thing, and they had a lot of stress in their lives. The people who lived second longest said stress is good, and they had a little bit of it. People who lived third longest were the people who thought stress was bad and had a little bit of it in their lives. And the people who had the shortest lifespans, stress is bad, and I have a lot of it. I raise that point not to be tangential, but to make this point that the things that we think are right or wrong, even if they are not right or wrong, they are, because we live to believe that they are true. Sharon, you bring up the idea of 70 minutes of moderate exercise a week gets the thumbs up. I would say this: 70 minutes of what someone acknowledges within their life as merited as moderate exercise gets the thumbs up. Because we know there are people who live very active lifestyles, but quote, quote, never have time to make it to the gym. They eat very, very well, but they don't follow the plan. So then these people who are doing well are led to believe they aren't, and their bodies respond accordingly. Because we know how we feel about ourselves. We know how we think about ourselves greatly impacts the way that our physiology responds. So with that being said, to your point about foods that are more woven within our cultural fabrics, our ethnical, groundings and fibers in our being, all of a sudden, what do we start finding? If we grow up thinking that who we are and what we do is bad, it negatively affects us. So we look at the world in which we live in, and what is held up as being the right. It's normally very isolated to a certain segment of people who have a certain amount of money, who have a certain amount of privilege and proximity to certain foods within where they can shop and where they can acquire X and Y and Z. All of this to be said, it's really easy to say, yep, well, if you want to be healthy, here's the hoops you need to jump through. But Sharon, you raise the point of everybody feeling like they need to do the next newest thing. Within this research that was conducted, we did some qualitative interviews from the quantitative research. And this one interview sticks with me, and I share it all the time. There's this wonderful, vibrant single mother of two who is going back to school. And she makes this point how she blames herself because she's been lazy since she's gone back to school and hasn't had the time to do the good things, to do the right diet and to get to the gym to work out. And she said that she needs to get back to doing the new thing. She needs to get back to trying new things. And the last part of that sentence stuck with me. She said she needs to get back to trying new things. You can't go back to doing things that you haven't done yet. But she speaks to the culture in the way that you just did. Our whole fabric of industry in food and fitness is built on the idea of fads. That the next new thing is the best thing that you can be doing right now. But history then shows that 6 months later, it's no longer the thing, which means it never really was. Outside of the energy of us believing that we continuously are never going to be enough to be as well, as healthy, as fit, as sexy, as strong, as fast, as young, as morally, ethically right within our choices. So where does that leave us? It leaves us feeling pretty cruddy, and it leaves the industry constantly fueled by desperate people looking for the next right answer. So the answer is unraveling that. It's saying, hey, you know what? I always used to tell a story. So I grew up in a large family who didn't necessarily have a lot. So our celebratory meals were going to the big buffet restaurant or getting fast food on a birthday. So I always make the point at the end of a really long, stressful day, let's say was out the door at 5 a.m. and I'm getting home at 11 p.m. I'm stressed, I'm tired. What would be better for me in that situation? Eating something that's going to comfort me, like a fast food value meal, or the healthy salad, counted the macros, did the da-da-da-da-da, which would be healthier for me in that moment? I would go tooth and nail to fight that me eating comforting food is going to alleviate my stress response. It's going to take me out of my fight and flight. It's going to allow my body to know that we are safe. And guess what? When the body feels safe and supported and happy and healthy, it starts responding that way. Now, again, I think the danger is like the bad food's going to kill you. It's like anything in excess is going to close you off from the fullness of life. And we see that on both sides of the spectrum. The people get trapped within the shame cycle, so they don't consider they have any control over improving their quality or making good, happy, healthy decisions. And we see it on the side of, I always eat the right thing. I always do my workout. I always am at the gym at 5 a.m. I've never done anything wrong. Both of these sides of the spectrum lose out on the fullness of life because they're living with a simplified message and losing on the simplicity of the fullness of their life that they get to experience.
Yeah, that's just really powerful stuff. And it's so true. I love your example of, going to work at 5 and getting home late and, and here potentially feeling shame about trying to nourish yourself. And I see this with, families that are working really hard to provide for a family and feeling guilty. They're not cooking the healthiest food, but they're nourishing their family, period. That's it, So really moving past some of the shame and already acknowledging all the wonderful, amazing things you're doing. The example of the story you shared, the qualitative research where she was lazy. Like, how is going back to school lazy,
It broke my heart.
Yeah.
Like lazy mom of 2, raising kids by herself, full-time job and going back to school. Nothing about that is lazy. But our culture says, if you're not going to the gym and making home cooked meals every day, you are lazy.
Yes.
So she reflects that. She goes, you're right, the world, because she also says at other times, she was asked the question, it's like, are you shamed? Like, do you feel shame? She's like, yeah. And she put the shame on herself. She's like, I am ashamed of myself because I know that I should be doing A, B, and C, and I'm doing X and Y and Z. She listened to culture.
Yeah.
She took it right from the page of what is right and what is wrong. And that is found within those simple messages. Now, again, this is not to say that there is not beautiful things in doing our work as people that people come to for support and guidance. No, we want to create pathways that people can understand. And sometimes that is simplifying the essence of something. But if we lead with that as our marketing ploy, here's the 6 easy steps to doing the thing, without saying, and you know what? It's a really, really complex reality, but here is that first pathway to take. And you may find it doesn't work for you. So then what does your intuition say? It says, just cool, now do that, implement that into that plan. And I think there's some hope. Again, even just a couple years ago, it was still restrict, take out, cut out, restrict, take out, cut out. And now it's experience more, try more, find things you like, weave in elements to what you're doing, and maybe other things will fall out. Maybe not. But if you can add into the fabric and the tapestry of your uniqueness and complexity with things that make sense, you are going to be stronger. You are going to be more enriched. You are going to be more confident in understanding yourself. And that's the root of maintaining that awareness of where shame can so easily present within a culture that's moving faster and faster and faster. So simplified messages are not going to go away. But our awareness of them can increase, and there's hope in that.
Yeah, I agree with you on a lot of points, in particular that I think our society is now more understanding of some of these things. Like we're actually enjoying food. I can remember like 20 years ago, it was like, food was not to be enjoyed, and there's this, real kind of renaissance for just falling in love with food and being more understanding of different body types. I mean, there's a lot going on in the nutrition world about understanding like things like BMI, how imperfect that tool is, and that, that extreme diet plans don't work, and I mean, we're really understanding all these things. And I also think that there's a lot to that we can do to also encourage people to enjoy foods more. Like, for example, if you're going to have your brownie, don't have guilt with it. Enjoy that brownie and, treasure that bite and enjoy it. Don't feel any shame with that. If it's a holiday meal, of course, family meals, all of these things that these traditional foods, all these things should be enjoyed, and there should be no shame involved with that, hoping that people can move past that. The other thing is focusing on adding things. I like to talk about this as a dietitian. Instead of thinking about eliminating, thinking about adding things, like one serving of vegetables, along with that comfort meal, a serving of fruits or something like that, that is something that you have available to you. I don't know if you have some other kind of tips or small steps that people can take to move towards that kind of a more balanced feeling with their health and fitness program, if you have other tips like that.
Yeah, and Sharon, I'll throw out kind of my idea and a lot of the work I do within the fitness world. But I think exactly what you just said from a nutrition guideline may make you go, here's some examples that parallel what I'm saying. So I have a long history within the fitness industry, teaching a lot of things, training a lot of teachers in a lot of things, a lot of modalities of movement. And in the last handful of years, I have found that my affinity for exercise, quote, has gotten less and less. My affinity for being physically in shape has gotten less and less. I actually say now that I don't think I've really exercised in the past 5 years. Now I move every day, but I move with an intent that is different than exercise. I lead events that are all designed to bring people who do not know each other yet in community with each other. People who do not know each other yet is a long way of saying strangers. Every month I create an event that is, it's movement-based, it's exercising, but the intent and the curiosity and the kind of the butterflies in the stomach that everybody feels is, I'm going to be spending this next hour with 5-year-olds and 80-year-olds, with people of every race and ethnicity, of every body size and shape, of people who are quote athletic and feel quote comfortable in their movement world, and people who've been blocked out from feeling comfortable. They show up for the connection in the community, and the movement is now a side benefit. I often use this as the example, and I say two things to them every month. First of all, I'm like, imagine this was a wedding. So I have a big group of people who are getting ready to move together. I'm like, imagine this was a wedding that you're invited to. The first question you are going to ask once you are invited to the wedding is, what's going to be the wedding meal? What's going to be for dinner? If it's chicken or steak, I'll show up. But if it's fish or pork chops, I'm not showing up. No one would ever ask that question, because they're going because it's a wedding. They're going because they're going to see people that they love and know do something wonderful in their lives. The meal is a side benefit. What if we look at movement? What if we look at what we put into our bodies in terms of nutrition, not as I'm eating the right thing, but I now bring a lunch to work that I can enjoy with my hands outside on a bench, because I want to spend more time outside. So now all of a sudden, you make nutrition decisions based off of what's going to allow you to experience different work. what if all of a sudden, so I run marathons. I don't train for marathons, but I run marathons because what fills my cup with marathoning is being around people doing something that fills their cup that they maybe have never done before. And I go to new cities that I've never been to before to run a marathon there because I believe there's no better way to get to know a city than by moving through its streets. I have no idea what my personal record is for a marathon. I don't care. I don't spend a lot of time running miles leading up because I don't find a lot of joy moving by myself outside of race day. And people go, well, then you must be this, this elite athlete. I go, no, I already told my story. I'm not naturally athletic, but because I don't have confines on myself in terms of how I need to finish, I will never gut it out. I will never die at the finish line because I don't want to feel that. It's okay if other people do. That's not my intent. The side benefit is the marathon. The true reason I'm there is to get to experience a world and people I would not get to experience otherwise. Mm-hmm. So Sharon, to the point of what can we do to make healthier, more sustainable decisions for our well-being? I think one of the things we can do is change our focus on why we are doing what we are doing. Do we live to eat or do we eat to live? A lot of times people fell into the, oh yeah, I'm supposed to eat to live. Like food is fuel. Actually, it's not. There's a fuel element to food. And if you focus on that, yeah, then food is fuel. What if food is joy? What if food is connection? What if food is time and pause and peace? All of a sudden, I think you start making different decisions. I haven't exercised in 5 years and I move every day. People go, what? Because the second thing I say at these events is, hey, everybody, once this event is done, let's say you get a message on the way home and someone asks you, hey, so you went to that event today. How was it? What was it? And since October 2016, since we've been holding these events monthly, I've said this. And I'm like, you're going to get to that moment where someone asks you, what was this event like? And you're going to have no idea how to answer the question because our culture does not have ways of expressing what we are doing here and why we are doing it. And then I encourage them. People will follow your lead because you say, I think there's something here for you to experience, to try. And even though I'm not going to be able to put it into words right now, will you come with me to experience this thing? Because I think it's going to be good for you. People, every single person is influential. We've lost that truth. We think there's only certain people who have influence. We call them influencers. I'm like, everybody has influence. If we start experiencing things that are meaningful to us and we share that with people who we love and who love us, there's a sustainability to what happens after that. I will take nutrition advice from people I know who innately care about me, who understand my uniqueness and my history and my why and my what. Those are the times that I start thinking about how I can shift how I experience life, because I feel safe, because I feel enough, because I feel seen. How do we do that with food and fitness and all of these things, mindfulness and meditation and fresh air and sleep? How do we remove these things from being something that people feel ashamed of into a space where they can feel happiness and wholeness and connection and joy? I think it's in leading with those things. What are you doing for your happiness today? What are you doing for your wholeness today? What are you doing for your joy today? The healthiness becomes that side benefit of our journey towards those.
I love that. I really love that, that it's really what feels good today, what fills your cup, with movement, with what we eat, with all the choices we make. And I think that's a really great place to conclude our interview. I also do want to ask you to share any resources you have, any ways that we can follow you, any information that we can find out more about you. And I also want to let all the viewers know that I am going to have a blog that goes along with our interviews. So I'll share all of this information with you at the blog at sharonpalmer.com too. So do check that out. But if you have anything else to share, we'd love to hear it, JC.
Yeah, so I will leave with an invitation to connect with me. I really am a person who my greatest gift is social collateral. My goal is to know everybody. So reach out to me, jclippold.com website, jclippold on Instagram, jclippold on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever. Questions, curiosity, connection. That's what fills my cup every day. So reach out with any questions, and I'd love to be a resource.
Thank you so much, JC. It's great talking with you. We'll see
Thanks,
you next
Sharon.
time. Bye.